Welcome to Automate Your Agency. Every week, we bring you expert insights, practical tips, and success stories that will help you streamline your business operations and boost your growth. Let's get started on your journey to more efficient and scalable operations.
All right, Elaine. So I'm in we're both in CEO groups separately. I'm in one that I thought it was just a really interesting thing that happened in our last meeting. I'm not going to share any details because that's all confidential. But the concept that we brought up mental health and mental health as founders and CEOs of companies. And just some of the interesting elements. Well, one was we had a lot more planned for that meeting, and we didn't get to barely any of it because we got on this topic and we started talking about it for like the entire meeting.
Wow.
Um, and even talking to some other founders and CEOs, right? You hear things like, man, it used to be kind of taboo to talk about going to counseling or going to a counselor for mental health as a founder or as a CEO. And now
Mhm.
it's kind of the opposite. Like, what do you mean you're not talking to somebody about this? Like, it's like the whole tables have completely turned or the pendulum has swung the other way where it's like, man, we really need to do something about this and how highs the highs can be and how low the lows can be. And what does that
Mhm.
mean as a human when you're trying to interact with family and friends and children? Anyway, it's
The
kind of a
struggle is
passionate
real.
topic. So,
Yeah. Well, and I've through our previous company and all the stress that I was carrying, I had a newborn baby and we sold when he was 13 months and officially was done around when he was 3 years old. And how much stress I had to carry that ended up in an autoimmune disease for me, angioedema. I was suffering so much. And then the
I know. I
depression hit
wonder
set.
if we should share, like, if you're willing to share the picture because it's wild.
Yeah.
You woke up one morning and your face was huge. Your eyes were like completely swollen shut almost. We didn't know what was wrong. And it ended up being because of stress.
Yeah. It took me a long time to figure out what was happening, a lot of different doctors, and it was due to chronic stress. But yeah, I'll share if anybody wants to see it. I look, my one of my best friends, him and I went to college, and he came to visit one day. And when I was having one of these episodes, and he called me the Walking Dead because my face would explode and swell, my eyes would swell shut as well. I couldn't see or open them, and it felt like I was being eaten alive by fire ants from the inside out. And it was so painful. And then once it healed, my face would just peel. So I had dead skin everywhere and on my hands. And so it was horrible. And it took me a long time to find out what was happening. And then once I found out it was from chronic stress, how to unwind. Because when you're at that level of stress and you're carrying it, you don't know what your options are. To undo that, it took me about 2 years to undo it, and a lot of rest and a lot of sleeping. And it was between after we were done selling the company and before I really got involved with our company, this company that we started, I really had to take some time to heal. And even then, once we were getting things going in this company, I still suffered from depression and all the impacts and negativity that we had to deal with in selling the company. There were new triggers for me, a lot of things on being a mom and dealing with being a parent. And I mean, we eventually, where I got to where I had to go talk to somebody. I remember talking to one of my friends that graduated from 10 KSB. And I was telling her that I was like, actually, I was honest with her. I was really vulnerable. And I just said, I'm actually having a really hard time. And I feel like the universe is against me. And she's like, Elaine, this is not okay. Like, well, the universe is not against you, but you do need to go talk to somebody. And she recommended somebody, and that's who I started talking to. And it took me about 2 years to work myself out of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Being on the outside and seeing you go through that too, Elaine, it's like, I think we both knew that our stress levels were rising.
Mhm.
I know I didn't give it a lot of thought. And when you woke up and had that happen, that reaction happen, the first thought was like, holy crap, that like happened overnight. But the reality was that was probably 4 years of a buildup that we didn't even think
Absolutely.
about.
I mean, that's the thing with chronic stress is that it's building and building and building to where I was surviving every single day at the highest stress level that I could be at. And I had other signs too that I wasn't recognizing as a part of stress. I started breaking out with eczema on my hands, and then the eczema was just going up my arms, like everywhere, and my hands. Like I got to where I couldn't even hardly wash my hands. It was so painful because the eczema was so bad on my hands. And I was doing some in between selling this our previous company and really doing this company. I had my company Burger Fit, and there's times where I'm on TV with the being recorded and you can just see the red patches up my arms, and I would have to tell the cameraman, please do not zoom in when my hands are making the burgers because I don't want the audience to see my hands because they were cracked and bleeding, and that's disgusting when you're touching food. And but yeah, I mean, you're right, it was such a long period of time, and you have to think about that is it took me years to get to that point of chronic stress. So it's not an instant fix. It took me years to unwind it.
Yeah, and this was, I didn't have as much of the physical manifestations as you did, but the stress levels too. I wasn't paying attention to it. I didn't know what that meant. And that it really came out, I would say, mainly in my attitude and my perception, kind of like how you felt the universe was against you. I was just always angry, was always frustrated, had no patience. And this is coming, when I grew up, the number one thing that I'd hear from my grandparents, my parents was, man, you have so much patience. And then all of a sudden I turned into this monster of like zero patience and
Mhm.
no ability to have, you know, any type of empathy because I was just stressed to the max. And for a number of reasons, business being a big piece of that.
Mhm.
Um, but then the unwinding is really hard. So, again, with you, Elaine, it was interesting watching from the outside because, you would go on TV. Well, then you travel, then you do interviews. That would create stress. And then you're dealing with the ramifications and the physical manifestations of the stress. And then that's causing more stress. And so it's like this vicious loop and this vicious cycle that you got stuck in.
Yeah, I mean, one of the last time I was supposed to be on TV, I was 2 hours from, my house, and so I'd driven down the night before because the TV we were gonna record super early the next morning, and so I got there night before, and I was so stressed going into that, that I started to have one of my angioedema episodes on the drive down. And by 3 a.m. that morning, I took a picture of my face and sent it to the TV station. And I said, I cannot come this morning. I am so sorry. I cannot see out of my eyes. And my in-laws had to come and pick me up because I could not drive myself home that day because I couldn't open my eyes. They had to hold my hand and walk me to the car. I'm glad I can smile and laugh about it now, but it was not funny back then. It was
Yeah, we
terrible.
tried to do this episode before. No, just kidding. We never tried to do this episode
No.
before. Right after the fact. No, no, no. But, and so, like, how did we get ourselves out of this? Because we're still on the journey. We're still
Mhm.
suffering from it. We still have our ups and downs. The ups and downs of the business hasn't gone away, but managing that stress and understanding that stress. And for both of us, talking to experts
Yeah.
about that, counselors and working with people that understand. Like, I remember, and Elaine, you know this story already, but the very first time, because I was having trouble relating to my son, and so I reached out to a male counselor that because I wanted somebody who understood fatherhood, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And um, so I found a counselor and jumped on the first call. It's kind of like my first foray into this kind of stuff, and within 10 minutes, he had already called me out and I knew exactly what it was. And it was basically I'd spend so much time worrying about work and stressed out about work that would use up all my energy and I wouldn't have any left over.
Mhm.
And I remember coming home after that session and just thinking, wow, how have I never thought about that before? But it's one of those things where you have to hear it from somebody outside
Mhm.
to go, who's not your significant other, who's not your parent, who's, not your kid,
Mhm.
some stranger that you're paying money to get to tell you this stuff
Yeah.
really helps hearing it, because then you can hear like, holy crap. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing. And once you
Mhm.
name it, once you acknowledge it, then you can start working backwards from there and say, well, how do I not do that? What does that look like in life?
Yeah. I the idea too that it takes time, because initially what I thought is, okay, well, I did it today and I don't feel better. Like I'm thinking that I'm putting in the work and that I should see these instant results. And I mean, saying that out loud, it does sound stupid, but when you're in it, you really are thinking, well, I'm doing this, and so it's got to get better. And it takes
When you're
so much
saying
more
you're
time.
doing that, do you mean like when you're saying you're doing that, do you mean like going to a counseling session, or what's
Well,
the
going to a
thing?
therapist, well, a lot of things. It's everything, because going to a therapist is one thing, but doing the implementation is another. And there's like other things too. I started doing therapy, but I also started writing in a journal. And I started off with just kind of doing a quick little summary of the day, because the number one thing is I don't want it to feel like more work. If it feels like more work, then I already did that shit during the day. I don't want to do more
Right.
work. So, I made journaling something easy and light for me. And so what that looked like was I did like a quick little summary of things I would want to remember from that day. And even if it was a hard day, this day it sucked for me. It was really hard. But I don't have to go into a 3-page detailed list, something just short and sweet. And then I said, I'm going to be thankful for 3 things that happened. 3 things. And I'd write down those 3 things. And I did that for a couple of weeks. And then I'm going, everybody says that you start doing this and you focus on the positive things and you feel better. I'm like, I don't feel better. But it takes time to re engage your mindset and the way that you think about things. And now I've been journaling almost every day for the past year, and I evolved it now. Now, instead of writing 3 things that I'm thankful for that happened that day, I write as many as I can. And so it can be 15 things. And I just don't put pressure on myself to elaborate. If I just want to be quick and just jot something down, the only person that's seeing it is me. The likelihood of me going back and reading it is probably at about 1% chance. So I don't need to spend a ton of time writing every word. I just need to recognize and have that effect that something good happened and I acknowledged it and I'm grateful that that happened. So what I mean by things take time is any of the things that you're doing, it's going to take time to change and reconnect your brain waves and make things a more positive setting. It's not going to be in 1 week. It could take 3 months. And it's constant work every day, because it is so easy to slip back into our negative ways of doing things and our habitual ways that we've been acting for the last 41 years or the last 6 months. Those things that we've already ingrained as a habit are super easy to go back into. And so those new things that we're trying to turn our minds into, it takes time. It takes so much more time than you think it would.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the things, as you're talking, it made me think about it as well. One of the things that I've really, I guess, become more cognizant of is we live in this world of social media and Instagram and YouTube where everything's perfect and all these founders are having all this success and like they make it look so easy and all this great stuff. And it's not easy. And there are so many ups and downs. And I hit this period of time where it's like, man, am I just the only one that's suffering like this, that's not able to do this stuff easily? And then, you know, you end up joining groups like CEO groups or, other programs that you can do out there. And you realize, oh shit, everybody is going through this. Every founder, every CEO, everybody who's trying to lead teams. This is hard. This is hard stuff. and not having people to talk to, I think, more recently than not, I've made a really big effort in building up friends and friend groups that are other founders, that are other business owners, because they can relate. You have something to talk about. If I talk about what we're going through and what we're doing with some of my friends who, drive Lyft or just our employees, the perspective is so different. They cannot relate. It just doesn't connect. And they'll sit there and go, yeah, yeah, I get it. I get it. Cool. But like when you have a real discussion with another business owner, with another founder, or with another CEO, and they're like, dude, seriously, yes. And you can have a deep discussion on it and you can have a real discussion on it. That's far more meaningful. And it's just, that's almost healing in itself to know that there's other people that are going through this and to understand what that's like.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And we have a lot of different listeners on here, not just business owners. So if you're an executive, like being friends with other executives, where are you at in your company and find it other like-minded people. Or, if you're wanting to move up in your career, finding friends that are in those places. And that makes such a really big difference. And on the personal side too, for me, what I kept running into in the small town in Tennessee where I was living is all the moms were stay-at-home moms. I was the only mom CEO of a not it wasn't a small company, like a retail shop. Like we've got a multi-million company across the world. It's very hard for me to relate to a stay-at-home mom. And I just started to feel really isolated because I can't have the same connections, the same conversations, and I really needed to be around other moms that were building companies to fill my fulfillment as a person and to have not just conversations, but just being around people that were doing more things because I had so many challenges. I am trying to juggle my house, my spouse, my child, my business, my 3 dogs because I'm an insane person. And so I have so many things on my plate. For somebody that doesn't have as many things on their plate, it's hard for us to have a bunch of things in common to carry on a relationship.
I think that's why so many people say it's really lonely as you get into this stuff because it's hard to build those connections.
And being a part of CEO groups has really changed that feeling for me. I don't feel so alone. Whether I'm in Tennessee or in Boulder, wherever, I still have that core group of women and men that have families, that are building companies, that are doing both. And so that isolation feeling, I don't feel like that anymore. And, just like you were saying, like, just to know that we're not the only ones going through hard times because business is hard. It's not
It's
there.
hard.
I don't know that there's ever a day where we go, man, that day we just had nothing bad happen.
Today was boring and easy. Yeah.
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 Like, no, every day's a new challenge. And that doesn't mean that things are bad happening, but we're growing and scaling a company. So we're constantly interacting with new challenges, growth, sales, marketing. Those things, that's what I mean by not every day is easy. It doesn't mean nothing bad happened, but that we had a challenge to overcome because I don't want to be bored in what we're doing. I would just stay retired. I like to suffer.
Agreed. Well,
No. No, this is so much fun. And all the work that you and I did separately and that we did together as business owners, like it took time, but we are seeing the benefits. I can now travel and not go into a severe depression the day I leave or the second I leave. That is a huge personal growth for me and hell of a lot better feeling leaving and being excited about where I'm going than leaving and instantly feeling guilty, depressed, worried, like every feeling that you could feel a negative emotion for, I was bottling the minute I left my house. That is not a good feeling.
so how do we wrap this one up? Because we could keep going down this path, but I think the big thing is you're not alone. Mental health is important. Find somebody to talk to, find a friend group that you can relate to, join a CEO group. That's super helpful for both of that's probably my number one piece of advice is like don't be afraid to talk to a counselor or therapist and join a CEO group. Or
Mhm.
there's groups out there if you're executives or management You don't have to be a founder to join all the groups. Like, get out there and find similar people going through it because they're going to have discussions like this.
Yeah. And the universe is not against you. And I learned that, things are hard, things don't work out, and it's not the universe is against you. That's just life. That's part of living life.